Inside each mix color node, there is a effect channel, or factor, which determines how much of the effect from the second input is added to the original input. A value of 0 means that the output will be entirely from the first input, ignoring the second one, so the light will be turned off. A value of 1 means that the output will be entirely from the second input, overriding the first. Intermediate values allow for a proportional mix of the two inputs, creating a controlled balance between the two lighting effects. However, for a simpler and more intuitive approach, we will opt to use exposure nodes. These nodes allow us to directly adjust the exposure of each group of lights, making it easier to modify the light intensity without having to balance the contributions from different inputs. Therefore, press Shift-A, type EXP in the search field, and from the window that appears, select the corresponding option. Place the node in the connection between the butterfly light group and the first image channel of the first mix color node. Now let's proceed to add an exposure node to each connection we've made, duplicating the previous exposure node for each link and making sure to arrange them so that everything remains clear and easy to read. This method ensures that each group of lights is treated with the same initial settings, allowing us to then individually adjust the exposure to achieve the desired effect for each specific light group. We can run some tests on the exposure nodes by increasing or decreasing the light intensity in the specific field of each light group. This allows us to directly observe how each change affects the scene's lighting, helping us optimize the lighting effect for each group. A useful step is to rename each node or exposure so that it matches the light group it is associated with. This makes it easier to quickly identify the specific node during the editing process. Let's start with the first exposure node, which refers to the butterfly light. We select it, press the F2 key, and for example, enter the text EPX_butterfly. Next, we select the other exposure nodes and rename them appropriately. The potential of Blender's light groups goes far beyond this. In fact, we can fully unleash our creativity to modify the colors of the lights, giving the image a completely renewed atmosphere. Let's see how. We press Shift-A, type Mix, and add a Mix Color node again. The placement of this node is flexible. It can be inserted either before or right after the exposure node. Let's choose to place it before. The almost completely white image appearing in the left window suggests that something isn't working quite right. The blend mode of this mix color node is set to mix by default. This means that Blender blends two colors together. The result depends on how much each color affects the other, which is controlled by the mix factor. If the factor is high and the added color is light, it can make the entire image almost white, because this color dominates. On the other hand, the multiply mode doesn't just mix the colors, but multiplies them mathematically. This factor darkens the image because each color value from the inputs is multiplied, reducing the overall brightness and enriching the dark colors. So let's set the blend mode to multiply, and observe how the image returns to being correct. Now, just as we did earlier with the exposure nodes, duplicate the multiply node for each light present and insert each copy into its respective connection. It's also important to organize the layout clearly and neatly to ensure that it is easily readable and understandable. To better understand the effects we can achieve by modifying the configuration of the multiply and exposure nodes, let's proceed with these variations. Butterfly light. Let's turn off the butterfly light by setting the exposure parameter to -10. Fill light. Let's change the color of the fill light using the hue saturation value parameter and set these values. hue to 0.6, saturation to 0.75. Let's reduce the exposure to -6. Key light. Let's modify the color of the key light with these values. Hue to 0.6, saturation to 0.25. Let's lower the exposure to -0.4. Right secondary light. Let's change the color of the right secondary light by setting these values. Hue to 0.015, saturation to 0.3. Let's slightly increase the exposure to 0.5. Left secondary light. Let's modify the color of the left secondary light with these values. Hue to 0.95, saturation to 0.085. Let's slightly raise the exposure to 0.5. Looking at the image in the left window, we can see how these small changes have created a completely different atmosphere. Warmer and more welcoming, all without the need to re-render the scene. To finalize the compositing process, it's essential to add the denoising node to eliminate noise and some artifacts from the image. This is why we enabled the corresponding channel in Blender's passes before proceeding with the rendering. We chose not to add the denoising node at the beginning of the process of setting up the light connections in order to keep the generation of test renders lighter and faster during the various stages of work. Now press Shift+A, type Denoising, and place the node near the EXR image. Connect the denoising albedo channel to the albedo input of the denoising node. Next, connect the denoising normal channel to the normal input of the same denoising node. Now move the denoising node between the last head node in the chain and the viewer node. Connect the image channel output from the head node to the image input channel of the denoising node. Finally, connect the image output channel from the denoising node to the image input channel of the viewer node. Give Blender a few seconds to recalculate and clean up the image. As always, save the file incrementally. In the left-hand window, carefully select the image menu located at the very top and then proceed to click on the Save As option. From the window that opens, select the appropriate folder. Set the file format option to TIFF or another format that does not lose quality and proceed to save the file. Alright, with this lesson, Module 2 comes to an end. We have explored numerous topics and there are still many more to discover. If you wish to continue the journey, I invite you to join me in the third module of the course, where I will show you how to integrate the sideboard into an interior setting, just as shown in the reference image. Best regards and see you soon.